Alrighty guys, let's do something a little bit different today. Let's respond to your questions. How's it going, everybody? My name is Suris. If you're unfamiliar with my channel, I try to make budget Magic the Gathering decks for Commander that can dominate tables without dominating your wallet. But today, we're going to be looking at a bunch of comments from all of you because I appreciate my audience and I do read the comment section. So I wanted to put together a video of me talking to some of y'all and well, outside of every now and again being able to put together a deck that y'all have requested in the comment section, I don't really do a good enough job of replying directly to every one of you. And for some of you, I do end up wanting to make replies to, but I feel like there's more to discuss, and I don't always have the time to do a comment that is really, like, at length for every single thing, and there are some questions that repeat themselves, so I figured this may be a good place to address a lot of those. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the first one. This one is from Alone Cuda. It looks, I feel like I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they say, every precon has a soul ring. If you're not running one, you are a slur. Okay, so let me go ahead and get one thing perfectly clear. The argument that if you're not running a soul ring, you're just an idiot is an argument that only idiots would make. Because whenever you select any card to go into your deck, any card at all, you have to ask the question, why is this going in? What is the purpose of this card entering my deck? And for Soul Ring, the answer is obviously ramp, but then the follow-up question is, what kind of ramp? Much like when you have a 3-mana commander and you want 1-mana ramp instead of 2-mana ramp because 2-mana ramp doesn't really make your commander come out faster, you need to ask the question with Soul Ring, does this belong in my deck? And the way to answer that question is always, how fast do I want my deck to go? If you want your deck to go balls to the wall as fast as humanly possible, then yeah, obviously, go ahead and put the Soul Ring in. And if you like the gambling aspect of sometimes drawing the Soul Ring and throwing it down, then sure, go right ahead. For me, though, I don't like Soul Ring because I don't like the variance that it adds to the game. At least not the kind of variance that it adds to the game. You see, in my experience, because Soul Ring makes you go mana positive, it is the kind of card that lets you get so far ahead of the rest of the table that the gameplay experience ends up being that the game is warped around the decision to play the Soul Ring. Player 1 plays a Soul Ring, and suddenly players 2, 3, and 4 need to gang up on player 1. Or player 1 and player 3 play a Soul Ring, and now suddenly there is an asymmetrical arms race at the table where 2 players are just not in the running at all for several turns. I personally don't enjoy those gaming experiences, so I try to not be a part of enabling those gaming experiences by not running a Soul Ring in my deck. The only reason that you would say that it's idiotic not to run one is if your only goal is to win. And for Commander, winning is not actually my goal. My goal is to participate in a way that feels meaningful. If I end up being arch-villain at the table, like I usually am, and my deck does something that produces a game-ending threat a couple of times, and I get stopped, I don't think that as a wasted game. I don't think of that as wasted time. I think of that as my deck successfully doing exactly what I wanted it to do. And if my opponents didn't have the ability to present a way to stop me from killing them, then we move on to the next game, and we see how things go. I've had several games where I just don't end up producing a game win, but I do produce a win state, and I do it in a way that I personally enjoy, and usually cards like Soul Ring just simply don't factor in to that at all. I also find that Soul Ring becomes a lot less necessary when you build your deck with a lower mana curve, so I just find this conversation about Soul Ring being necessary and you being idiotic for not playing it kind of a stupid one. And then we have this one from Rekamon, another Reddit creative writing react. Please put anything in the thumbnail or title so people don't get clickbaited with your lack video ideas. I feel like you meant to put an of somewhere in there, but you didn't, so here we are. Now, there are a few people on my channel who are not really big into me pulling a conversation from Reddit and then kind of using it as a springboard for a greater discussion, but, I mean, for each of you, you have the ability to not click on the video if that's the case. There are several videos where I will just put the Reddit post as the thumbnail, or at least the title of the Reddit post as the thumbnail, and when I don't, it's because there's something else that I really wanted to talk about. And in the video specifically that you're referring to, I actually did go into how priority works in Magic the Gathering with what I felt like was a fully detailed explanation. The Reddit post was simply the springboard to allow me to easily get into that conversation. I really like using things from the community as a springboard to talk about subjects because, well, quite frankly, I make a lot of videos. I try to make 4 to 5 videos a week, not counting shorts, and that's not counting the videos that go up on my main channel or on my secondary live channel. There's probably about 4 or 5 videos a day on average that come out of me that go out to various places of the internet. So yeah, sometimes I can't just sit there and let my shower thoughts dictate everything. Sometimes I scour the internet to see if there's an interesting conversation that I can lend something to or make a video out of. After all, this is my creative outlet for that kind of stuff instead of just engaging on social media mindlessly like I used to. Now, if you feel like that content isn't for you, that's entirely understandable, and I thank you for the time you've spent watching my content to get to that point. And hell, I even take constructive criticism pretty well when it comes to the content, but I'm not just gonna suddenly change that content is there. I could spend every single minute of the channel making just budget decks, but when I tried doing that in the beginning, getting a budget deck out as often as I wanted to do became, well, a little taxing, and the actual quality of those decks started to suffer. So in order to produce the content that I wanted to do at the rate that I wanted to do it, having conversations about other things in the community while still having 2 to 3 videos about budget decks seemed to be a way to give me a buffer to talk about things I wanted to talk about while also making the decks I wanted to make. Then we have this one from Steven Aldrich. Ramp is so mid and trash. I'm not even gonna give this much of a conversation other than bait used to be believable, and I don't find this to be good bait. But I may entertain it for a very, very brief discussion and ask, for you, what is the purpose of ramp? I did mention earlier in the video that lowering the average mana value of things in your deck does prevent you from needing as many ramp pieces, and I actually have plenty of decks in my repertoire that simply don't have a ramp package because they don't need one. My Terra deck has no ramp in it. My Sephiroth deck has 2 pieces of ramp, 3 if you count the sad robot that's in it that doesn't ramp to anything relevant in the deck at all. The decks that I play have ramp if I feel like they're needed, like a Leviathan deck or, a Landfall deck. But if it's a deck that I feel like doesn't need ramp, then I simply won't put ramp in. The conversation about ramp being mid or trash is kind of strange to me because ramp, like any other card in a deck, is meant for a purpose. It's to get you to game-ending things faster. Take a card like Priest of Titania, for example. This is undeniably a ramp card, and most players will recognize that it is such an overwhelmingly powerful threat once it has been presented on any table that it needs to be dealt with instantly. I don't think anybody's gonna call that mid or call that trash, especially when it's being used to prop up a spell like Doppelgang, a card that is meant to swing the game very, very strongly in the favor of the player that's casting it. You don't naturally get to the amount of mana to cast a Doppelgang by simply adhering to the 1 land a turn rule. Elsewise, you'd play like a 2-mana clone instead, but to make a card like this or Genesis Wave work, you do need ramp to get to that point, and that's its purpose. Ramp gets you to cards you either shouldn't be able to cast, or cards you shouldn't be able to cast on curve quicker. Not a bad video, but your avatar is disturbing. This one comes from Roman Turner with a bunch of numbers at the end. Alright, Mr. Someone's name, bunch of numbers, thing that can be generated on the fly. I'm glad you liked the video, and if you find the avatar disturbing, my question would be, why? Is it because I present with an obviously male voice but a female avatar, in which case the question becomes, what about trans people who simply don't have passing voices? If it's about how revealing the character is, well, the character's design is based off of Thrall from World of Warcraft, who's as open-chested as I am, so I guess the real issue then would be the fact that there are tits? In which case, my follow-up question is, are you 3? In a world where video games have existed for 20 years with a non-zero amount of side or underboob in character designs, did you wake up, like, yesterday? Is this new to you? Punished Cranky says this rig has a special button where it paints the wall, huh? So there are 2 definitions of paint the wall that I am experienced in. One is the, there's that image of Randy from South Park where he discovers internet porn and decides to just paint the walls entirely with all of his fluids, and yeah, that's probably one image you're talking about. But because my main channel is a political channel where I, amongst other things, talk a lot about trans rights, I'm also familiar with it being used as a euphemism for shooting yourself with a gun, i.e. painting the walls red, and since I do get mistaken for a trans person pretty often on my channel because of my choice of avatar, I don't know which one this is, so I don't know which way to respond. But I guess the valid response for both of them is, why do you care? 7RS Studios says, literally, how the hell do you have this discussion now? What if the theme of my Bracket 1 deck is winning? So this is in response to a video I did about the bracket system, and the question is, well, how do you even have a discussion about Bracket 1 if the conversation is theming? And I think that they don't understand what theming is, because the theme of a deck being mechanical, like elves, is usually something that is in bracket 2 or 3, but the theme of the deck being something aesthetic is usually what you find in bracket 1. My example was cards that feature Bolas or quotes from Bolas. That is what made my bracket 1 Bolas deck what it was. If your theme is winning, then our conversation is no longer about theme, it's about intent. And if your intent is to win, the secondary conversation is at what speed? If you're trying to win by turn 4, then congratulations, welcome to bracket 4. If you're trying to win by turn 6, then congratulations, welcome to bracket 3. I feel like this conversation is way more simple than you're really giving it credit for. Sin Grafer says, okay, serious new subscriber question here. What prompted you to choose the VTuber model you did? Is it a character from something? Fun fact, I actually have like a 50-minute video on my main channel, which is just called Suris, where I talk about the lore, about how my character design came to be what it is, but I'll give you the TLDR, not the slow version, the fast version, I promise. So, after I was in high school, my first major YouTube endeavor that I spent any time on was a project called Top Tier Scrubs, and as you can see, I didn't get very far with that particular project. A piece of artwork I commissioned for the old channel was this one right here, which showed a chibied version of me wearing Thrall's outfit because I was originally talking about Hearthstone, a card game that I was very into at the time. And when I moved into doing other streaming and YouTube endeavors, I still used the exact same assets later on when I started engaging in other projects. And when I got my first bit of fan art from those other projects, I got this piece of fan art from an artist named Chachinas. And this kind of floored me. I had never received gender-bent fan art, and it felt really weird at first. And then, after that fan art, probably because of how good the artistry was on my Discord channel, a bunch of other artists who watched my content started making fan art of that character model. So here is one from Jack the Vulture, where they made a Nekoized version of my character. Fast forward through a bunch of time, and it just kind of became an internal joke over the years that my character had been gender bent more than they had been presented as male in fan art on that channel. Eventually, I submitted a bunch of the fan art to an artist named Remixin, and they created a VTuber model based off of that gender-bent fan art, and, well, that's the artist who did this PNG-tuber model as well. She did both my first VTuber avatar, and she also made the PNG-tuber model that I made specifically for the Magic the Gathering channel, because I felt like a still-imaged PNG-tuber made a lot more sense for the kind of content that I did over here. An avatar makes more sense for live stream content, and that's not what I make over here at all. I'm literally just fast forwarding through bits of the video, but you can see how many pieces of fan art started just gaining their own bits of life in my community, where you could see different versions of my character, male, female, femboy, fucking Vaporeonized, even a just straight up hammer version of my character, one with tentacles. So many different variants of how my character was presented got made that the existence of those different variants just became their own living organism on my channel as far as I was concerned. It had gotten out of control, and I chose to lean into it. And then I found out that there was actually a VTuber whose stuff that I had watched and thought was really cool, named Suzu Sawara, who had become a VTuber because they watched my content and decided to, well, become a VTuber as a result of that. That fan art, or that person who was a fan of my channel, made this fan art of a slime girl Cirrus, and then I commissioned them to make a slime girl Cirrus VTuber model. And of course, fans of the channel started playing with that slime girl Cirrus VTuber model a lot more. And, well, we are here now. There are all sorts of weirdities that have existed because of how I've chosen to present myself on my channel, and it's created a very eclectic community of weird and strange artists. But you know what? I don't think I really would have it any other way, and I think maybe I've started to lean a little further away from the very, very artist-centered community that I built, and that's something that I need to get back to. I started presenting fan art at the beginning of every video on that channel, and I'm gonna be honest, I feel like maybe I should start presenting that fan art over here too, so some of y'all can get in on the same jokes. After all, how else am I going to explain to you why a black hole is petting me as I panic next to a VTuber and a femalified version of the Bio Lizard from Sonic Adventure 2? None of that is going to make sense to any of you without just a tiny bit of context. And then we have this exchange that began with Gavelstone Caniston saying, "Who's the lady in the intro?" And then Cake Eater saying, "I've never seen any lore on the character whatsoever," and, well, the video for the lore on the character does exist on a separate channel, and I've already told you where to find it, and I've given you the short version of that lore here. Then we have Space Pirate 97 saying, "Dude's obsession with drawn women is so freaking weird." And yeah, I guess it can come across that way. I do have a character who looks very, very like voluptuously female on my channel, and I do tend to talk about things like paladin women and slime girls and all kinds of stuff that I think is attractive when I'm talking about Magic the Gathering cards. But you know what? I mainly overplay that because I think it's funny, and I think people overreacting because of that is also really funny. It shows who's in on that joke and who's not in on that joke. And you know what? If my girlfriend ever feels like I'm getting a little too weird about that, she can let me know. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna actually defer to the judgment of my partner, who I have lived with for the past 3 years, as my North Star on that more than any weirdo random in my comment section. But considering that this is what fan art looks like when it depicts both of us, and one of these is her actual VTuber model, I feel like she's gonna be siding a little more with me on these things. Then we have Akros saying that they're not touching cards like Casualties of War with the 10-foot pole because targeted removal draws aggro way more. And all I'm going to say to this is coward. Absolute cowardice. 110% absolute bona fide cowering in fear cowardice. Drawing aggro should be something that you expect to happen, and maybe it's just because I'm so used to 60 card and 40 card Magic, where the only possible target for anything is you. I feel like drawing aggro from your opponent should be not only expected, but wanted? It's like wanting to play a hard video game, but hoping the video game itself never gets difficult. The hardest thing to do in Commander is the 1v3, and the 1v3 is inevitable at some point, so why not practice that 1v3 as often as you possibly can? Get your opponents to gang up on you. Get them to make political deals to end you. I feel like being afraid of being targeted comes from a position of having so much investment on being the winner of the game instead of a participant in the game that you probably need to go and play some 1v1 Magic to get an idea of how to actually handle targeted removal being aimed at you specifically. Also, if somebody just cracks back at you every time you remove one of their things, that's fine, but that can also lead to that person losing the game. I don't know how many times I've played a game where I've drawn the ire from a person who was maybe about to win a game, and I took away one of their important game pieces, and instead of dealing with the person who could lethal them, they aimed their guns at me, and through attacking me, they left themselves wide open for somebody else to take them out of the game entirely, and then I was in a position with lower life and fewer resources, yes, but still being alive at the table to fight the person who just spent all their resources on ending the life of another player. I feel like that's a perfectly valid way to operate in Commander, and as it's a multiplayer game, who cares if you get targeted? Learn how to do better while being targeted. And then finally, we have this one that I actually did respond to because I wanted some clarification. This one comes from the Arcane Castle. And they said that this is a whole grown man, by the way, which, yeah, I am an adult, and I am a man on the internet. No differently than playing a female character in an MMORPG or any single-player game. It's really all the same thing. It's just whether or not you're used to seeing it that changes. Like, I feel like if you're playing an MMO and you see a female night elf running up to you, you don't automatically assume that that's a girl. You just kind of assume that either that's a guy or the gender is out in the aether somewhere until you discover the actual truth. And I think people basically got on board and got used to that because a role-playing game means we can do whatever the fuck we want. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't see being on YouTube as any different than that. It's a giant social media thing where I've picked an avatar for myself, and in my special unique case, that avatar was created not even by me, but by my community. It is a part of my story of how I got to exist on these platforms with any following at all. But then I got the clarification from Arcane Castle saying that this was to expose a creep, to expose a predator. So now we're in the realm where you're calling people predators, and usually that's, you know, short for child predator. We're out in the open just calling people that with no evidence and nothing at all. And, well, I did even ask, okay, so you have some evidence I'm a predator, I'm assume, and they never responded to that. Not within the 6 hours after I took this picture, and not now, since it's been a day or two since they made the comment. So let me make one thing abundantly clear. If you are the kind of person to randomly go around to other people's YouTube channels and just call them child predators, then maybe you don't need to exist on this platform as a content creator. And content creation seems to be something you clearly want to do. It's why you've made videos about unboxing and card games and all kinds of stuff as recently as 9 days ago. And, oh looky there, you and I are creating a very similar kind of content. This is a deck tech, and outside of the specifics of how we go about creating our content, you seem to be making the exact same kind of content with this, which means, I don't know, you and I otherwise could be fairly cool and could be fairly chill with one another, but instead you decided to come over to my channel with a limp dick response about me being a child predator or some dumb shit. And while there's certainly a world where the better thing for me to do is to take the high road and not respond to any of that, I also feel like you shouldn't be the kind of person that goes out making those accusations on the internet in the first place. At the end of the day, I may make responding to comments a more normal part of my channel, but hopefully I don't end up having to respond to, you know, weird ones like the last one as much. I'm gonna respond to a mixture of positive and negative ones so that I can get good feedback from y'all, and hopefully y'all appreciate that. But if you're the kind of person that goes into comment sections and just slings out accusations without any evidence whatsoever, I don't know. I feel like maybe your parents failed you, and you should probably be ashamed of yourself. That said, thank you all for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And you know what? If you did, maybe leave a comment that maybe I'll respond to in a follow-up video of these. Tomorrow we'll have another deck tech put together for probably another Lorwyn commander, or I may make something based on y'all's suggestions. I do need to get to one of those soon. That all said, thank you for watching all the way through to the end, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one.